The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Doulagivers Level 1 End of Life Doula Training. My name is Suzanne O'Brien. I am thrilled to be here with you. Thank you so much. The first thing I want to say is thank you for being here. I know that we all have really busy lives. We have people on this webinar from all over the world. There are people that were emailing and saying that they were going to set their alarms at 2 in the morning. And, it's such an honor, and it also is a reminder of how we're all touched by this subject, end of life, and how important it is to be there and support one another and educate one another. Where we have knowledge, we need to share that, because knowledge is the answer to everything. Education is the key to everything. And so I'll talk about my journey in a minute, and where I have a lot of this background. I feel really, really important that I get out there, use a platform to share the wealth of information I have in this right now very closeted space, this closeted topic of end of life. So this is exactly what the program is, and I'll share a bit more about that. So my name is Suzanne O'Brien. I want to welcome you to the free Level 1 Doulagivers End of Life Doula Training. This is the 90-minute version. I am also going to answer your questions live at the end of tonight's webinar. So please feel free to write in a question at any time and in the question box, and I will address it at the end. I always say congratulations, and I really want to emphasize that, because you are going to take part in an education series tonight that will hopefully change your life. It'll empower you with wonderful information. Again, I said that education is the key to just about everything. I always say I don't tell people ever what they should choose for care and end of life. I do want you to make informed decisions. And that is something that I feel is really missing. We don't talk about end of life. Most of us don't really know what that looks like, or the first thing about caring for someone at end of life. And with that, unfortunately, when we're making decisions for healthcare and for different treatment options or things that come later in life, we don't have a good grasp on what choices we have and what things mean. And that is, again, so vitally important to have information so you can decide what is the right choice for you. This is about your journey at end of life and as you age, and you should have it your way, as long as it's provided it's not, of course, a safety issue or hurting anyone else. This is a subjective area of decision making, and you do have decisions. There's lots of things we can do. There's lots of support and help. You just need to know about it and where you can access it. So I always say congratulations for being on this webinar. The feedback from the Level 1 training has been absolutely incredible. We have emails and reports back from people, and they've used it all over the world, because this is something that you can use anywhere. And the wonderful effect that this had for families, patients, communities, even medical providers. Having this training, the difference that it made in the care of a patient and their family has been enormous. So for Doulagivers and for myself, I'm committed to a platform of being able to share as much knowledge and information that I possibly can with the world. And that's another thing that's wonderful about webinars, is that we can meet from all over, in any time zone, in any place in the world. But we do give live events as well. So this training is something, it's our global outreach. It's also really for people that are interested now in the end of life doula trainings and profession, to get an idea of what that looks like. What is the training? How is it run? And is it something that feels right? So the movement, the end of life doula movement, is on. And I have to tell you, I've been at the end of life doula piece for 10 years now. It's really in the last year and a half that, boy, has it taken on a different level. And it is so exciting to see. The ironic thing as well is that there are so many people that still do not know about the end of life doula profession or what an end of life doula does. So we're going to cover all of that tonight and know that you are on the cutting edge and groundbreaking. Really, the biggest shift in care that you're going to see in healthcare is the doula coming and playing a part in all of the gaps that mainstream healthcare can't fill, which is really the time. We're all running around. These people doing the work are absolutely incredible: doctors, nurses, CNAs, all of them. And it's a very, very difficult space to work in now, because they have so many patients, they have so many tasks to do. They have to see large numbers with limited time that they can actually be with the patient. So I know, because I can speak from that place myself as a former hospice nurse and oncology nurse, which is cancer nurse. Most amazing people in the world, working so hard to make a difference for people, but it's really challenging because of the way the system is set up, the reimbursement system. We're not given a lot of time to be with patients. But the other reality is that as a society, we're not doing our part either. So we're not taking charge of how we would like to age, what treatments we might want or not want at the end of life, doing our advanced directive paperwork. So, it's a multi-layered place that we are in right now that's gotten to this very challenging and dysfunctional aging and end of life process. But for something that is 100% guaranteed, that we are going to age, that we are going to have an end of life experience for our loved ones, for friends, for ourselves. The elements that I'm going to teach you tonight and things that I've learned that can make that end of life, that inevitable end of life piece, go 80 to 90% better than if you don't do those things. So why not? And also, there's a lot of wonderful bedside sharing that I'm going to do from patients themselves, what they talk about at the end of life, what their needs are, what could make it better for them, and what their perspective is as they look back on their life, what they've learned and what they want to share with us. So this course is going to be full of a lot of great information. The movement is on. There are national initiatives that are taking place right now. So as I mentioned, the last year and a half has really catapulted this into a different level, a different stratosphere. And that is being helped because of these national initiatives in the United States. I know that I believe Australia and Canada, it's taken on. It's, we're all trying to get to that place of where the end-of-life doula fits in within their healthcare systems in different countries, because understand that we all have that same thing in common, no matter where we are, no matter what culture, religion, socioeconomic status, we all are touched by end of life, and we all deserve to have the support and the education to make it go well for something that's inevitable. So for the United States, there are two initiatives that were put in place this year. One is NHPCO's End of Life Doula Council. Now, the NHPCO, for those of you who don't know, stands for National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. They are the membership organization of all the hospices within the United States. So they set out best practices, and they dictate different standards and really help them to obviously give the best care to their community. So the NHPCO is the membership organization in charge of all of the hospices throughout the country, and a wonderful organization. And NEDA, which is the National End of Life Doula Alliance, is a nonprofit membership organization for all of the end of life doulas now that are out there, and the end of life doula trainers. So the council was formed to share the value of the end of life doula as part of the end of life care team. They're going to collect data from families and how the doula fits in, and the benefits of the doula, and all those wonderful things that are needed with a new profession and movement. and also we're setting up best practices. When we as doulas are out there and seeing what really works, we can share that information with them. They can share that with their members. And then NIDA is another absolutely amazing organization. So their website is nidaalliance.org. You should, if you are considering tonight doing this profession and training, you should go to nidaalliance.org at some point, and they have a national badge and assessment. That will be, I believe that will be out in mid-February, ready for people to take, and that will be a core competency assessment that end-of-life doulas can take and receive a national badge, which is really important because end-of-life doulas are not a medical licensure. It's not a training that has a license attached to it, and that's a good thing, and it's not a good thing. So why is it a good thing? It's a good thing because right now, as we said at the top of tonight's webinar, is that there are those of us who were working in mainstream medical who it was very challenging to get as much time with the patient and the family that was needed, especially in an end-of-life scenario. I don't know if you've been touched by end of life, but it doesn't have a time limit to it. You know, when somebody's going through their end-of-life phases, and there's going to be back and forth, and there's going to be ups and downs, and it could be difficult the whole entire time. It really requires the presence, the compassion, the kindness, and the education of somebody who can be there walking that family through that journey for the duration, like a birthing doula. So if you think of the word doula, doula is a Greek word that means non-medical person who gives physical, emotional, and spiritual support to another person. So it was really important in there that the doula word means non-medical person. This is a non-medical profession. Are you going to learn medical things in my training? Absolutely. It's the same way if you were the family member of a end-of-life patient, I'm going to teach you the same type of thing. So you are going to learn some medical terms related to the end-of-life process and maybe even the certain disease process that your loved one has. That's the same thing that I'm going to do in this course. So even though you are considered a non-medical professional and don't need a license to go with that, you do need education credentials, and the core competency badge of NIDA for a national standard is absolutely brilliant and amazing, and it's wonderful. So there's a lot of real movement happening, and it's happening at a rapid pace because I believe that we finally, as the medical system and as a community on the whole, realize the gaps that are missing right now and the value of having professionally trained individuals that don't have a time limit being able to help pick up some of those empty hours that are sitting there, because we only have one opportunity to do end of life correctly for somebody. One shot at it. We can't have a do-over. Most of the things that I've learned that I teach are things that we wish we could have done better, the things that worked, and talking about the things that absolutely don't work. So I want you to know I've worked with thousands of patients and families over the last 10 years, and I want you to really I want to give you everything, especially people who want to do this profession. One of the biggest issues is your experience. So for us to practice, because one end of life experience is never going to be exactly the same as another. Why? Because there are different variables that are factors there. There's different elements of how that person is in their being, what the family dynamics are, just everything else that comes to play in that. And so you want to be, the more experience you have working in end of life with different scenarios, different patients, the more you're able to pull from those experiences for being a great practitioner. And that's what I really impart to you in this program, which is really important to get you all that experience per se up to speed right in one place. And then you go out and you get your bedside and you start acquiring your own. It's a beautiful, honorable space to be in. I think there's no other way that we can be of higher service to another human being at this time than to support them in something that is so very important. So why is the end of life doula becoming so needed and so embraced right now? 9 out of 10 people say that they want to be cared for at home if they were terminally ill. Now, this was by a National Hospice Organization Gallup poll in 1996. Every statistic, every survey that I have found since then, you can kind of take your own inventory. Where would you like to, if you found out you had a terminal diagnosis, where would you like to be? Would you want to be in a hospital? Would you want to be in some other type of facility? Would you like to be home? You know, most people want to be home in their surroundings, but that is not always accomplished very easily. So for instance, hospice is so amazing. I absolutely love hospice. It's a holistic model of care. Hospice nurses are probably one of the most amazing groups of individuals that I have ever known. People who work in this space are just, to me, completely angels, and I know that they work tirelessly to make such a difference for patients and families. For me, it was a question of, again, feeling like I didn't have enough time with that patient that I wanted to have in that home environment, training that family. And what were the factors that allowed me to not have that time? Well, it's a couple of things. So there's 3 things I've really identified that are problems with where we are at such a difficult place at end of life in the care. Is number 1, death is the second leading fear in this country. So it's the second leading fear in the United States. Now, people always ask me what's the first, so I'm going to share with you that the first is public speaking. But death is the second leading fear, and it's palpable. You know, when people do have that fear, for some reason we've gotten in the last 100 years just completely turned around with the fact that we don't plan on end of life, we don't talk about end of life. So when it shows up, which we know it's 100% going to show up, when it shows up, it's a shock. We're not ready. Nothing's in order. Maybe sometimes even the person can't even partake in what they would want or not want. The fear allows everyone's stuff to come up. It's very interesting that end of life has a way of bringing everyone's stuff up to the surface, and you can have families that are completely fighting about what mom should have, what she shouldn't have, and at the end of the day, whose decision is it for what mom should have? It's mom's. But if mom is not feeling well, maybe she's not even able to physically take part in the discussion. And this is not something, you don't want to start discussing about what to do or not do for end of life when somebody is in front of you that is a terminal or just got a diagnosis, because that's when additional fear and crisis, we don't decide things right. And I can tell you, to this day, I have families who do not speak to one another because they had such arguments during the end of, so their mother died anyway, because we know we have an end of life. The fighting was unbelievable, and continued on past that person who had died. So really tragic to see that happen. We don't want it. But here's the really important thing. We want to give what is needed to have the 9 out of 10 people who say they want to be cared for at home the ability to be able to have that happen. So right now, about half of people die at home. So the other half are dying in hospitals or nursing homes or some other institution. So why is that if 9 out of 10 people want to be at home? Well, it goes back to us not planning ahead, us being very fearful of death. And so, again, talking about it and educating is one of the first things we can do to alleviate that fear. In fact, I hold a death cafe in New York City, and I had one last week. And the amount of people, I had somebody come who's a medical reporter, who's actually a doctor, but now a journalist for medicine, and came to the death cafe to see what it was all about, to get, to get opinions from the people there. And she was blown away by what the concerns were, the conversation, again, this fear, the lack of knowledge. And so when people can come there and we can share that, I have so much information to be able to share. And I want to just bring a sense of peace to people who don't have any other place to get their questions answered, or something that they can do to secure some of their wishes. So she was absolutely blown away by all of the people that were there. That we had about 18 people there. Some people had not been there for a year, and now we're back because they were traveling. And we had somebody who's 88, 89, and a lot of 70 and 60, and then some younger ones as well. So again, this is a topic that touches us all, but really powerful getting this conversation going, and also saying again, if people want to be at home, how is that going to be able to be accomplished, especially if you have, let's say you have an 85-year-old man who lives with his 82-year-old wife, and that's all they have, the main caregiver. So hospice being an absolutely gorgeous, holistic model of care, and hospice workers are amazing. As a hospice nurse, I teach the loved ones how to care for their dying loved one in the home. And so because the average person comes on hospice so very late in the end-of-life experience, I'm not able to fully give them, most of the time, I am struggling to give them as much education as I would like to give them in that short amount of time. So it goes back to not planning ahead. I think that I don't want to exactly say, but I think from 7 to 14 days, half of hospice admissions are from 7 to 14 days on the program, when they have up to 6 months. So we're just not talking about this in planning for when we are at end of life or terminal, where we'd like to be and how that can be accomplished. So very important that we talk about it. My patients. So this is when I was in the oncology care unit. So I'll talk from that space. I worked, so again, my name is Suzanne O'Brien, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a registered nurse, and I've worked most of my nursing career in hospice care, which is end-of-life care, and or oncology care, which is cancer care. And it was from the very first day I first started at hospice, believe it or not, as a per diem nurse. And that first day, I knew that I was in the exact place that I was supposed to be in. It was like a piece of puzzle fitting in. And I just felt so connected to something so much greater, something so much more important than just a job, a career. It was absolutely blew me away and was so powerful. But at the same time, patient after patient was not having that beautiful, sacred end-of-life experience that I know is possible and that I know people can have. And it was heartbreaking because they were left with, that being the family, with the last time that they were with their loved one, that they have tons of regrets, wish they had did it differently, don't even know what happened half the time because they're in a state of shock. So I thought, what is going on here, and how do we fix this? How do we make this better? And I didn't understand because I grew up with the awareness that death was a part of our journey. Death was a part of the life's journey. They're not separate. They go hand in hand. And I feel like when we realize that this journey will not be here one day for us, I feel like we live with a much more beautiful awareness and appreciation of every day. But in the oncology unit, so I started with hospice, and I realized that things weren't going as well as they could go by any stretch. And so I think that I went back and really wanted to go into a field where I saw what patients go through before they actually get to hospice, get to end-of-life care. And I guess, down deep the whole time, I knew at some point I'd be an educator, but I really needed to understand what was happening. So I went to the oncology medical center, and what was happening is, again, it's very scary when people are sick and when their life is threatened. And, it was heartbreaking. A lot of the things were really heartbreaking. And again, this lack of planning. If you don't express your wishes to your family and loved ones, to your physician, and have them in writing with an advance directive, it goes into what I call a default. And the default is that we're going to, as medical providers, they're going to do everything they can do to keep you alive because that's what is expected and taught. And I think that we forgot over the last 100 years, we forgot that dying is a part of the experience, that it can go well, but it needs that support and kindness and education for not only the patient, but for the patient's loved ones. So as I was in the hospital in the oncology cancer unit, I was working with all different types of people, young people, people getting treatment, people newly diagnosed, and people that were dying. And so for people who are really advanced, and I use, for example, people who've lived a long life so that we have the best case scenario when we talk about end of life, but we know the reality that that's not always the case. I've had patients from 5 to 106. But right now, let's use the discussion for somebody who has been lived a full life into their 80s and has disease process all over, not reversible, not going to get better. And what they were telling me, it was interesting when they were in the hospital, you get very close with your patients and they would share with me, they'd say, I just want to go home. Why am I here? I just want to go home. And these were people that, had their cognitive abilities, were clear, sound of mind, were weak, but were clear and in their thought process. And I would think to myself and I'd say, Suzanne, if they can tell me that they want to go home, why aren't they? So it was very confusing to me. I don't think they understood. And I think a lot of families jumped in, a lot of fear jumped in, and a lot of us with a overall denial that end of life is part of this journey rushes in, and it really can create a lot more pain for this whole situation. So it's really an honor of these wonderful people that I got to care for, that I really have a voice for them, that I've come out talking about that we need to do better. We need to talk about this ahead of time so we don't get trapped in that default place. It is okay that you do whatever you feel. If you want 20,000 treatments and surgeries and try this and try that, I think that's fantastic. Just make sure it's informed decision and educated decisions that you are making. And for yourself, this is about your journey. So you want to make sure that you have what you want. Another statistic, healthcare proxy and living wills, known as an advance directive, is those two documents together. A healthcare proxy is somebody that you will name to speak your wishes for you that you've already chosen if you are unable to speak them. That is a healthcare proxy. And a living will is the document that says what you would want or not want for treatment if you were not able to speak for yourself. It's all laid out. So 87% of people say it's important. These documents, yes, they are important. 23% have them done. And I believe out of the 23%, I heard that half of the people actually know where they are located. This is not a document that will do you any good if you don't know where it is. Death is the second leading fear in this country, and I'm sure you can pull from many, many experiences in your life where you know somebody who got sick, where you started talking about end of life doula or this kind of work, and people say, oh, I don't want to hear it. Don't talk about that. Or how could you do that work? Oh my goodness, there's so much fear. And so I had to say to myself, what is this fear? I had to uncover, if I could, what the fear of death was, because it was so palpable and causing so much destruction at the end of life process. And guess what? I went on a journey. I studied. I tried to uncover everything, and I could find nothing. Absolutely nothing to validate fear being attached with end of life. What I will say is that most people have a regret that they didn't use their time well and wisely. In fact, I want to share with you that the number one regret of the dying patient is that they wish that they had the courage to live the life they know they were meant to live. That is really powerful. I really want you to hear that, because I want you to hear that for yourself. The number one regret of the dying patient is that they wish they had the courage to have lived the life they were meant to live, a life of purpose, something that they knew they were here to achieve and they didn't, for whatever reason, listening to other people, not believing in themselves, So that's super important. So that fear is not a fear of death itself that I uncovered of anything. It's more of, I feel the biggest issue at end of life is my time is here. Oh no. And what did I do with all of that time? It's a great lesson for all of us. The number one fear of the dying patient is that they don't want to be a burden to their family. So they are really worried that they are a burden. And think how tragic this statement is. And I've had patients where I come in as the hospice nurse and, my patient kind of calls me over and we're talking and they say, I feel awful what I'm doing to them, to my family. They realize how shocked, stressed, and uncomfortable they are with caring for them for the most part, because we just don't, most people have not even seen somebody in the dying process. And now somebody's in the home dying and the main caregivers are the family and loved ones. So there's a real gap and disconnect there. There's so much more guidance that needs to be available for families, especially in the home environment, and that is the doula. So the number one fear of that dying patient is they don't want to be a burden to the family. So think about, you have a dying patient who is now burdened and upset that they are a burden and causing their family pain. That is not the energy that we want at this last time. We have to have the scenario be so much more healthy, natural, and supported so that people can have their last time with their loved one. 78 million baby boomers started turning 65 about 2 years ago. 78 million. That is in the United States. 20% of them do not have children. So this is significant. We are in an elder care crisis. It hasn't even been called to the extreme that it is needing to be called, but I've been working in it for a very long time. We have a crisis upon us with our aging, our elderly and end of life, and the numbers are going to get that much greater in decades to come. So when you want to do projections on care, what's available, what the need is going to be, we're in a crisis right now that is going to get so much worse. And if you're going to look to the mainstream healthcare and insurance to solve it, it's not going to happen. In fact, every time we turn around, unfortunately, more things are getting cut. Insurance is... I was with somebody the other day who was talking about when their father-in-law was dying. And they had to worry about, they were being told with their insurance what was covered and then it wasn't covered, and services. They were wrapped around a lot of that and worrying about the insurance and the coverage and the stress of that. And here was somebody they loved so much dying and the last time that they'd ever have with them. So when you bring in education to train non-medical professionals and even families that will have this education and skill to better be able to be comfortable, to be effective, to be present with their loved one, that's going to be able to alleviate these staggering numbers that are only going to continue. So the non-medical professional for caring for every aspect in our healthcare system is going to be the answer to what the crisis and the gaps are right now. Staggering. 20% don't have children. So when we look at our end of life and our aging, usually it's an adult child who will care for an aging parent, arrange that care. Not always, by the way. So sometimes that's not even an option, but there's 20% of people who don't even have that option. And a lot of them come to my death cafe. In fact, this one woman was there, and she's always there, and she said, a bunch of my friends, I think they're in their early 70s, a bunch of my friends, we don't have any children, we don't have any family. Who is going to care for us as we age? They're petrified. Well, we're going to come up with something for them. But it's a really legit concern, and we want to be able to be of service and to make it better. Doulagivers, End of Life Doula Training, the skill of learning how to care for someone who is dying. So Doulagivers, that is our organization, doula and giver. It's our word. It really encompasses what we do. Again, that doula is a non-medical professional that cares or gives to someone else holistically, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. There are different levels to the End of Life Doula trainings. You are taking part in the free 90-minute Level 1 End of Life Doula training today. It is also known as the Introduction to the Certification course. So there are lots of people that are interested in becoming End of Life Doulas now and getting into this line of work. This is a wonderful place to come and get an overview of what this really looks like. What is the reality? How does the training work? And what does it do? What does an End of Life Doula do? And so the different trainings are the 90-minute, which you're taking part of today. And then I have Certification End of Life Doula training for those who want to practice as an End of Life Doula. We also have the Doulagiver Specialist, and that is a training. It has 3 trainings that are within the program: End of Life Doula, Elder Care Doula, and the Doulagiver Care Consultant. And if we are going to make a difference in our aging and help to support them, it's not going to be resolved by just showing up at the end of life. It needs to be caring for our elderly holistically. That, by the way, they have statistics says that 85% of people over the age of 65 need some form of support at some point in their journey. That could mean 24/7. That can mean for a few weeks after maybe a fall or something acute. That could mean 3 times a week. But over the age of 65, 85% of people need some form of care. We are living for decades so the good news and bad news, once again, our life expectancy has gone in the last 100 years from 46 to 79. That's huge. But with that, we are living so very long. But with living so very long, we're living with chronic illnesses, cognitive issues, physical limitations, and we need help. And these people need help. And it's not available. That help is not there, and it's not there holistically. So when you work with elderly as an elder care doula, you are a care consultant, which is somebody who helps them do that aging well planning. So it's not just helping people with their paperwork and advanced directives. It's helping people to realistically look at where they could possibly spend their last years, how that would be attained, because I don't think people realize how much money it takes if you need to bring in care or things of that nature, and also physical limitations. Is it practical that somebody lives in a home where the bathroom is upstairs? Because usually it comes to a point where people can't walk stairs. So the Doulagiver Care Consultant works on all of those type of things with our clients before somebody is even aging. So well in advance, we have a loose A, B, and C plan so that, again, it's not a shock when we get to that place. There's always going to be different variables, but at least we have a blueprint and we have the paperwork and a plan, and our family is on board. So the different trainings we have are the Level 1 End of Life Doula, the Doulagiver the Doulagiver Specialist, which is the 3 trainings in one, and then we have the Certified End of Life Doula Practitioner. 100 years ago, this was a skill. We're going to talk about end of life right now and how to care for someone. This was a skill that was handed down generation to generation. So people will say, this is so incredible. This is brand new. It's really old. It's not really brand new. Now, did we incorporate all the wonderful modern knowledge and medications and things that we can to make this such a great training and education? For sure. But caring for somebody who is dying is a skill that people have been doing for thousands of years. It's really in the last 100 years that we have completely come full circle with not even identifying that end of life is a part of the journey, not knowing the first thing about what end of life looks like. I mean, if you think about it, most of our elderly live in different parts of the country or in different types of places like assisted living or nursing homes. And, sometimes we get that phone call that, mom died or something happened, but we don't see that decline. We don't see that process. And it's been really hard for people to be able to actually identify that death is a reality when we just don't see it. The other thing is, it is very, very difficult to ask someone to care for a dying patient in their home when they don't have any background and they're petrified. I think it's really unfair, and I think we need to do better. So let's get out there and educate ahead of time. 3 phases of care in the end-of-life doula training. You have the shock phase, the stabilization phase, and the transition phase. The shock phase. So this is the beginning of your end-of-life doula training. This is when someone gets a terminal diagnosis. Oftentimes there is an overwhelming feeling of shock for both the patient and the loved ones. This shock can present itself in many ways, such as depression, denial, anger, and withdrawal. And I will tell you that the shock is what I see with 90% of the families that I've worked with and the patients. And very important to hone in here that as an end-of-life doula, as somebody is supporting someone at end of life, you not only care for that patient, but you're caring for the loved ones as well. Because everyone attached to that person with a diagnosis is affected by this end-of-life process. So it can be a really heavy place to be in. Really, and each one of those people can be having different experiences with the same end-of-life diagnosis. So what can you do? Now, remember, it is very helpful to remember that this person and family have just lost all control over their life of what they perceive. So if somebody, I think it's always really helpful to try and put yourself in the position of somebody else. Walking in the shoes, we can never do it unless we're there, but just try. And if someone told you that you have a limiting time left to your life and that there is no reversing the process, it requires those around the family to have a very strong and supportive presence. So remember that this is not something that can be reversed. They're getting a terminal diagnosis. So for the most common reaction that I see, 90%, if not a little higher, of my patient and family has been just a shutdown, a shock. It's that moment of, oh my gosh, it's my time. So do we need to understand what that might feel like and also what we can do in that space? Because I've had so many people say to me, Suzanne, I knew somebody, they got a terminal diagnosis. I didn't know what to say. So I didn't show up. I didn't say anything. Well, no, and then they regret it. So no, we want you to be able to show up. We want you to have the tools to be able to show up. It is so important to show up and to remember about this control. So one of the things you want to do is establish trust and security with both the patient and the family. This can be even your own family. This can be a member of your family, your mom, your dad. You want to really be in that space of being grounded, being present, and being a great listener. I'm going to give you some techniques to do that. So one of the biggest things I want to emphasize is building trust and security at this moment, because they're scared. And the patient's scared, the family's scared. And especially if you are going to be the end-of-life doula coming in as a practitioner, you have to establish this trust right away, because it's going to set the tone for your relationship with that patient and family for their whole journey. And if you don't have trust with them, it's going to not be a great journey, because they are going to look to you as the doula, as the person who does this, as guiding this journey, for advice on what to do and just for strength and comfort. And if that trust isn't there, they're not going to be able to receive that. So It's vital to establish trust and security with the patient and their family at this time when their world has just been turned upside down. And the best way to achieve this is through being a strong, solid support. Never take over. Meet the patient and the family where they are in their process and work from there. Building the trust sets the tone for your entire journey with the family. So it's very interesting because coming from a nursing background and this whole never take over, you've probably seen or heard nurses who, part of their whole thing is to kind of give that tough love, is to say to the patient, okay, we're going to get up, you're going to eat your food, you're going to, you're going to do some physical therapy, you've got to get moving around. And it kind of gives that patient sometimes that push out of their comfort zone. This is something entirely different. And so for nurses that come into the end-of-life doula space, it's really important to be able to make that shift in thinking. And it's also quite hard because we have been doing it for so long as nurses one certain way. Well, this is different. The patient is the one who is in control, and we are here to support them in achieving whatever they need to for their comfort, physically, emotionally, and spiritually through this whole entire journey. So when I say to meet the patient and family where they are, what do I mean? So this is something that is very important, especially remembering that when you get a terminal diagnosis, you can be in all of those different places: denial, anger. Denial is an amazing mechanism for protection for our mind. So I've come upon newly terminal diagnosed patients, been assigned to them, and they have said things like, well, I go golfing on Wednesdays, so I'm going to go golfing on Wednesday, and they haven't been out of bed in weeks, and it was just something that they needed to say for their own security of mind or peace of mind. Am I going to sit there and tell them that they're not going golfing on Wednesday and to snap out of it, they have a terminal diagnosis and let's get real? Of course not. Am I going to ever let them try and get out of bed? And when they can, of course not. But they don't. For the most part, they're saying things to soothe their emotional body and what's happening here. So when you keep in mind that people have just lost control over their lives when they're given a terminal diagnosis, giving them back as much control as you possibly can is so important and strategic here. So I've had patients who would refuse to take their medicine or pain medicine because that's the only thing that they had a choice in, that they felt. And to their detriment, they were like, nope, I don't need it, because they had no control over the rest of their body. They weren't doing anything. They couldn't get out of bed or out of the chair, and their body is, deteriorating in front of them, and they're having, just a horrible time accepting that. And they said, no, I don't need it. I don't want it. And, obviously then their pain can get really out of control. So what I do is teach you as doulas to give them back as much decision-making as possible. Let them direct you. So there's techniques that you're going to use in the shock phase that are really effective. Give them back control. Very important. What kind of control can you give them back? What can you say to somebody in a shock phase? Can you tell them it's going to be all right? Which is one of the things that we do a lot, by the way. When people are sick, we say, it's going to be okay. We don't know that it's going to be okay. And it diminishes their journey when we say things like that. So we want to really be careful on what we say and how we go ahead and interact at this point, even though we have to show up and there's lots of things you can do. So when you go to give them back control, what can you say? You can say that, ask them what you can do for them. What is that just doing? That's giving them back decision-making and control. Now, they might not be able to physically do the things that they want done themselves because of their illness, or whatever their situation is. Weak, not being able to walk, and just, very sick and tired. But they might have a list of things that they would like to achieve, like let's just say the lawn being mowed and or having the dog walked. Or a lot of the times my patients will say, can you please take care of my husband or my wife, which is the main caregiver. Because when we get a terminal diagnosis and people first come on the program of being on hospice and with a doula, is that they have usually been sick and been on a journey for quite some time. And when we get there, it's really, exhausted, and maybe the house has been let go. And that main caregiver, think about that 85-year-old man, that 82-year-old woman taking care of him, has been bringing him back and forth to doctor's appointments, trying to help him get out of the chair. It is exhausting and too much. So a lot of times they'll ask me, Suzanne, please make sure my wife gets some sleep. Please help her. And so I usually do two things. I not only have this discussion with the main patient, is asking, what can I do for you? Just tell me. And I do it with the main caregiver as well. So very important to check in with both of them and give back as much control and decisions making as you possibly can. Can you say to somebody it's going to be okay? No, because we don't know that. Do we hope it's going to be okay? Okay, of course. Can we say to them that we're going to be here for them? Yeah, you can say that. Can you say that you're going to walk this journey with them? You'll be here with them through this entire journey. That feels really good to patients because they're scared and they feel alone. And when you tell them, when I tell people I'm a phone call away, I don't get the phone calls as much because of the feeling of security they have and the education, the relationship we build throughout the journey. They don't feel that they need to call me, in the middle of the night or call me in a panic, because we're working through that, and they feel secure in knowing that I am a phone call away, which is really, really special. Meet the patient and family where they are, another really important place. Now remember, please, that end of life can take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. So you might have a patient who is in their shock phase, has then, had some time, moved through it, which we'll talk about in a minute. And maybe one day you walk in the house and that patient's having some emotional, whatever, they didn't sleep that night, they had a dream, they're all of a sudden scared again, they're end of life. You really need to support people where they are and work from that point forward. And if you have a patient and a patient, let's just say a patient for a minute, who is in denial with their end of life process because they are so fearful and they stay in denial their whole entire end of life journey, is that okay? Well, it actually is. Is it ideal? No, but it's not our journey, it's theirs. And we have to be there to support and love them as much as we possibly can. And, my goal is to have people obviously feel safe and supported, that they organically move through the 3 phases of life, which works out really beautifully. But if for some reason you have one of these cases where somebody stays in a denial place and that's what they had to do for their own protection and where they were, we just have to love them where they are and just make sure that, all the other things are taken care of that we possibly can. You cannot push people. You have to create the safe environment for them to be able to process and get to that place of acceptance with you by their side, but they need to come to it. And they usually do. I will tell you that end of life is an incredibly beautiful, natural experience. And most patients organically go through a lot of these beautiful cleansing and places of acceptance if they are given enough time and if they have the right support system around them. Build the trust. I can't emphasize how important this is. I have one patient story. I have so many, but I have one that I'd like to share, particularly with this trust issue. So I was assigned to a patient as a hospice nurse at home, and it turns out that she had come down from a different state to live with her son and his family, and they were going to care for her through the end of life. And when I first got to that door of that patient's house, the son answered the door, and he was in his 40s, a lovely man, and he was visibly almost shaking. And so I said, oh my, to myself, okay. Now, when I went in and met the patient, she's lovely. She had maybe a tiny little bit of pain, 2 out of 10. She was doing well, eating. I mean, this is one of these wonderful cases where we had months together, which is unusual. But she was doing well. It was the son, the main caregiver, who was an absolute wreck and mess. And so remember, in the very beginning tonight, I talked to you about, if you are a doula, you are not only taking care of the patient, but you're taking care of the patient's loved ones as well. And so I knew that my immediate work was with him. And it was. So he didn't know, he was an engineer. He didn't know the first thing about end of life. He was petrified. So we do the education, the talking, and I said, if you call me, I'll call you back within a few minutes. And he would just ring my phone to test me. And that's what I'm saying. The trust is so important, because we were able to establish so much trust in the very beginning that he could count on me, because then he could relax a little bit, and we had this incredible, beautiful journey together till the very end. It was absolutely amazing. But he was testing me. I would tell him information. He would fact check me. He would test me on how long it took me to call him back. So critically important, you're their lifeline to the outside for the end of life case that they're taking care of at home. There might be no more serious position that we can be in than caring for that family and that patient. And we have to give 150%. And that's where these hospice nurses do that. They're absolutely amazing. They just have many patients at once. They can't be everywhere at once. So it's great to bring in some other people that can fill in the gaps of time. So for us, we had to build that trust. And when we did, our relationship started to relax, and we can focus on things and go through the journey up until, the very end of this case. I was in this house in the afternoon, and I could tell that this patient was probably going to die that night. She was in an active dying, going into that transition, or in that transition. And there was a daughter of the man who was taking care of, and the woman who they were living with, who was 8 years old, who lived with them. And I had a relationship with her as well. And I said, would you like me to wait till she gets off the school bus so that I can answer any of her questions, and we can go in and see grandma together, because grandma was in her deep sleep coma. And they said, you would do that? And I said, of course I would do that. So we did. I waited for her to come off the bus. And by the way, I wasn't on the clock anymore. And she went in, and the woman was breathing, her labored breathing. And I was letting the girl ask me any questions that she could ask, and helping out as much as she could help out. Putting a warm blanket on her grandmother, putting lip balm on her lips, and just making sure she felt comfortable, and also letting them know that I really felt that she was going to die that night. As a doula, you get really good at this, and your job, especially in that latter part of the transition, is making sure that that patient is dignified and comfortable. But it's really turning a lot of your energy on that family, because it's happening. This patient is going to die in that home during the night with that family there. And if they're petrified now, you can only imagine how they're going to feel if they're really not prepared for that. So letting them know that. And it was so interesting, because I remember that the husband and wife had a little bit of an argument at the table, where the husband said, I'm going to wait for you, because I was getting on my shift at 8:30 in the morning, and I, as a hospice nurse, can go out and pronounce somebody who's died. So he said, I'm going to wait for you. If she dies in the night, I'm going to wait for you to get on at 8:30 and then call you. And the woman said, no, you're not. You're calling the on-call nurse, because hospice always has great on-call available. So that was like a little bit of a moment. Well, anyway, the phone rings for me at 8:30 in the morning. And here's the beauty of this. Besides so many just pieces to this wonderful experience, the day before when I left, this woman was breathing quite heavily. and labored, and we couldn't get her exactly that comfortable look that I like. And it's not always possible. Her mouth was hanging open because of everything going flaccid, and you could really hear the breathing, and it was a little bit disturbing and uncomfortable for people. She was kind of at an angle. We're trying to get her to sit up again. And so when I got to the house that morning, now you have to remember that these people have just lost their loved one. Their mother just died. I get to the door, they open the door, and they say, it kind of excited. They said, we haven't touched her. We want you to see her. Like that. And lead me into her room. And when I went into the room, she was sitting just in a perfect position in her bed with her mouth closed, almost like with a little smile. She looked simply beautiful. And here's what happened that night, they told me. At about 2 a.m, now her bedroom was downstairs and the son was sleeping on the floor next to her bed. At about 2 a.m, the wife said that she came downstairs and she said to her husband, remember that Suzanne said that she may not die in front of you, because this is another common phenomenon that we'll talk about a little bit more advanced in this course tonight. But patients, lots of the time, will wait till you leave the bedside. That's not the last thing that they want you to see. And this is so incredible because many of them have been in a sleep coma for days with their eyes closed, not talking, even for weeks. And how do they know the 5 minutes that people leave the bedside that they choose to pass? Not always, but this does happen. So she said, remember, she said that many times people do not want to pass in front of you. And so he said, okay. She goes, why don't you come up to bed? So he went up to bed. And when they got in the morning, when they woke up and they came down at about 5:36, this is what they saw. And they said, oh my goodness. She just looked so peaceful and so beautiful, and it warmed their heart. So it's so important to be able to establish trust in a relationship, because had I not had that trusting relationship, many of the suggestions and things that I talk about with that family, they would have not listened or not taken. And one of them that was significant was the fact that she was going to die, which is really important, but also the point that people sometimes need you to step away, especially if they look like they're ready to go and they're not. And a lot of times they need permission to go. And they took that advice and they did that, and it worked out beautifully. So building the trust right away in the first 24 hours, I cannot stress enough. Be a great listener. Make sure that you do everything you say you're going to do. So if you say, and I say, give yourself a cushion. If you say you're going to call tomorrow at 2, I always would give yourself a cushion. I'll call you tomorrow between 2 and 3, because you know how things come up. And if it's not, they know they can call you if there's a crisis. But the thing is, if you don't call at 2 and you said you were going to call at 2, it might sound simple. It's not. It starts to break down their trust in you, and it's going to set the tone for your relationship. We always ask 3 questions in every case, on every visit. Question 1, are there any acute issues? What is an acute issue? That's like pain, nausea, or exhaustion. Acute means something that is jumping out that needs to be rectified right away. Then, second question, are there any safety concerns? Fall risk, confusion, weakness, swallowing, 2 of the things that you know are going to go and have an issue with at the end of life, because again, we're not reversing this process, are the ability to stand and or walk, and the ability to swallow. So these are all fall risks. Safety concerns. You always want to be assessing for safety. And what other support system do they have? Remember, I talked about the 85-year-old man with the 82-year-old woman. That is not going to work. It might be working now. Let's just say that Mr. Miller can walk on his feet. He can get up by himself. He's a little weak, but he's okay and steady. We have an end-of-life scenario. We have a disease process that is going to continue to decline. So even if it's okay now, what do we have in place? Because we know that's going to happen. So instead of it happening or him falling, God forbid, I want to put things way ahead of time, because we can make this so much better. So case study number 1, and this is how the course works. If you're going to go into end-of-life doula training, most of the training is going to be with education and then given real life scenarios for patients and families, so that you can then put into practice what you've learned. Again, remember that 10 years of working at the bedside with thousands of patients and families, putting it into a program that you can get a lot of that knowledge all at once. So let's just do a quick one for shock phase. I'm going to show you how that works. We have an 82-year-old male with a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And a lot of times that as a doula, this is the information you're going to get. You're going to get how old your patient is and maybe what the diagnosis is, and that might be it. So let me read you a bit of the scenario. So you find out that he's been having chemo treatments for the last 9 months. He has a history of arthritis and high blood pressure. He lives in a house with his wife, who is 78. They have been married for 48 years and have 2 children who live out of state. Not uncommon. His wife has osteoporosis and cataracts. You enter the house on your first visit and find the man in a reclining chair sleeping in the living room. You notice a cane next to the chair. His wife is at the kitchen table. Her head is down and she is a bit slumped over. You notice that there are dishes overflowing in the sink and that there is unopened mail and paper all over the kitchen table. So let's just take this and do the 3 questions. So I show you how that is going to be your golden rule every case on every visit. So if you're visiting somebody every day as a doula and you come there and you're asking the 3 questions, why, and everything is, let's just say everything is fine. Why the next day would you want to ask the same questions? Because things change and they change quickly. And so great end-of-life care is being on top of these changes before they become really problematic. Are there any safety concerns? So when you look at this case scenario, the first thing, because safety is the only non-negotiable we have, are there any safety concerns that you see for this family? Well, the first thing that I'm going to point out is that you have an 82-year-old man and you have a 78-year-old caregiver. So there you have a safety issue because you have 2 elderly people. The second thing is, if you know anything about chemo treatments, he's been having chemo for the last 9 months. That can really take its toll on people. So that's going to be, he could be really weak. You already see that there's a safety issue. He's got a cane next to his chair. So this has safety all over it. Now, the other safety issue on this is that they live in a house. So they live in a house, the 2 of them alone. They have children, but they live out of state. And so where do you think that bedroom and bathroom are? Probably upstairs. This is not going to be something that's going to be doable. Maybe not now, maybe not in the near future. So you really have to, again, you want to be ahead of everything with putting things in place for optimal comfort on a daily basis for people. So safety is really important because you can prevent falls and things from happening, and with great attention and being a good caregiver, you can do that. Let's say, are there any acute issues that are happening? So the acute issue, again, what is an acute issue? Something that's jumping out at you: pain, exhaustion, nausea. Right now, just from this page and you will get all these case studies written out for you and exercises when you are in the class. You are going to identify just off of this page is that exhaustion. So that main caregiver has her head down at the kitchen table. You could tell she's slumped over. There are dishes overflowing in the sink, unopened mail. So you can tell that this has been quite the journey and that she is overwhelmed. So you want to get that woman some help and some rest. And what support system is available? So this is something, again, that I try and put into place right away. And I ask this all the time. Why? Let's say there's a son that comes home from California and he's been here for 2 weeks and dad didn't pass away and now he has to go back. Well, mom had 24 care with the son being there for 2 weeks, but now he's going back and she can't do this by herself. So you don't want to get caught in that scenario, which happens all the time. We want to make sure that, and I pull from everything. I pull from neighbors, family, from hiring a part-time doula, from volunteers, everything that we can do to get as much support and care in that house so that wife can be a wife and that husband can have quality time. They can have quality time with each other at this very last moment, not being exhausted and being responsible for everything. It's something that you can really set up beautifully with a lot. And people want to help. People are good. They want to help make a difference in the end of life. What can I do? You can tell them what they can do. You can start to arrange that schedule, that support system, having people bring in meals. It's absolutely wonderful what the doula can work with. Second phase is the stabilization phase. And that is one of my favorite phases during this whole end of life process. This is also where the magic is going to happen, if there's going to be magic, or where the work is going to get done. So let me tell you what the stabilization phase is. What it is. This is the phase where wonderful work can be done. It is hopefully a time when the patient's pain is under control and all acute issues identified in the shock phase have been addressed, leading to the highest quality of daily living for both the patient and the family. When things are stable, conversations can be had, goodbyes can be said, and unresolved issues can be addressed. I have to tell you that end of life is a holistic experience. Mind, body, spirit. The emotional pain that comes with end of life, that can come, that usually does come with an end of life diagnosis, can literally cause physical pain and also just horrendous journey at the end. And so these pearls here, conversations that we need to have with one another, goodbyes that we need to share, and unresolved issues, this is where it's going to happen, if it's going to happen at all. And this will transform the end of life experience for that patient. Not everyone gets a stabilization phase. Why? Some people come in and go, well, unfortunately right now, I get many calls that the patient is in their transition phase. Can you come be the doula for this patient? They're dying. And they're literally dying, actively dying in a transition. So there's no awake, there's no conversation. It's just sort of, trying to rush in there and help. We want to be there way ahead of time so that people have a much better experience. So let's see what you can do. This is the perfect time to sit with a patient and talk. Ask questions about his or her life. This often leads to issues or situations that need to be looked at more closely and resolved. Forgiveness is the path to unconditional love. It is during this phase that we encourage giving and receiving forgiveness of things that we have done and things that have happened in our lives. Patients oftentimes do what's called a life review on their own and go over beautiful insights about the contribution they had in this world. Validate their feelings. Be a great listener. Encourage family members to have alone time to share with the patient. There are conversations that will need to be had that will not take place in a room full of people. These goodbyes are vital. The goodbyes, the thank yous, the I love yous, the I'm sorries, the please forgive me are vital to peace and acceptance, allowing for a positive passing. This is everything. This stabilization phase is the difference between an amazing end of life and one that is not. And so you need to know what to do in that shock phase, getting things down to a place of being stable, getting rest, getting it organized, getting control back to that patient, that the patient can be in a place that they can have a stabilization phase, because that is where the beauty and the work, and it makes such a difference for people. Why is it important? Unresolved issues will prevent a person from having the most peaceful death possible. It is vital to use this window of opportunity while the patient is able to communicate and have lucid conversations to wrap up loose ends. Patients can do much of this work simply by talking about past regrets with the doula or a trusted loved one. It is amazing how, as a doula coming in too, patients will share with you what they might not share with a family member. Why is that? Part of it is that they don't want to burden their already stressed family with more stress, but they need to talk about things. There's things that are bothering them, and you built that trust. they can confide in you, and they will, and it's absolutely an honor. So we have a stabilization. I'm kind of going to go through that quickly, guys. I do this, it takes a lot more time when we do it in the class, but I want to give you another example of a stabilization case study. We have a 74-year-old woman with terminal cancer. So this particular woman lives in an apartment by herself. She's on Social Security, and that is her only source of income. She has a cat named Prudence, who is 7 years old. This woman has one daughter who lives an hour away. They have had a strained relationship for many years. Her daughter has 2 children, a girl who is 10 and a boy who is 8. The patient has been divorced for 30 years. She does not speak to her ex-husband. She belongs to a church where she has been volunteering for community functions for years. So, are there any safety concerns? So you're going to go back to those 3 questions. Are there any safety concerns? Well, we don't really know. We don't know how this woman is walking until we put our actual eyes on her and see her. But for right now, let's just say that she's doing fine. She's walking fine. But is this something that is of concern because we have a terminal diagnosis that this person is going to progressively decline? Yes. So now that she lives alone right now, might be, but this is not something that's going to be able to be safe in the near future. So that is a safety concern. Are there any acute issues? I would say an acute issue on here. Nothing terrible. Doesn't talk about pain, which you're always going to obviously assess when you go as a doula. You're always going to ask about different things like pain, exhaustion, how people are sleeping. There's a whole list of things that we do every day that we get to that you'll be taught. This woman, is there an acute issue? I wouldn't say there's necessarily an acute issue except for it turns out that they, this strained relationship is very serious. So is that acute? Yeah, because it is, we don't have a lot of time at end of life. And, we just talked about repairing or accepting and forgiving. And if this is something that we can see if there's a possible way to help facilitate some kind of reconciliation for both of them. If this woman dies and that daughter never gets resolution for whatever was happening, and those grandchildren didn't see their grandmother and they need explanation on what happened with that, there can be a lot of emotional layers here. But, again, at the end of the day, people are lovely and forgiving, and usually at the end of life it can bring out the ability to go there. So that would be my acute issue. The other thing is I'm going to address that cat. So one of my main concerns of my patients, especially if they live alone, if they're dying and they live alone, is if they have a pet, where that pet is going to be placed. And we as doulas really try and bring a beautiful home that patient feels really okay and comfortable with, so that they can be at peace knowing that their pet will be cared for, that they don't have to worry about them when they leave. What support system does this woman have? Well, she has the daughter, which I got excited about in the very beginning, but then that only lives an hour away, but then as we read on, there's a strained relationship for many years. So I want to see what that is about and if that can be repaired. And I'm quite excited about the 2 children. They're at the age of 10 and 8, that they can really be instrumental in caring for their grandmother, and they should. We should not be shielding children and pretending that people are sleeping, or that they just go away and go on vacation and that people die, which is what people have told people in the past. You want to be honest with children, age appropriately, and hospice does a wonderful job of, they have social workers, there are many books, but you don't want to shield and pretend that end of life is not a part of our journey, and you want people to take part in the care of that person if they want to and are able to. Doulas seem to give that backbone of strength to the family to actually be able to care and love that end of life person, and it is so healthy to do. Phase 3, the transition phase. The transition phase. What it is, the transition period is the time right before a person dies. It is the transition from this world to the next. This period can last anywhere from hours to days. Usually it's days. What can you do? As a doula, you should be aware of the way that the body physically shuts down. Systematically, we all die the same way, no matter where you are in the world. And no matter what disease process someone has, the body goes through many of the same steps in the very end. Not everyone will go through every step every time, but it is best practice to be familiar with all of the steps or stages so you can identify what is happening and suggest interventions for comfort, or simply let the family know that what they are seeing is a natural part of the dying process and not to be afraid. That alone, for me to explain to them how the body is shutting down and that that is a natural part of the process, has alleviated so much fear with patients and families. Absolutely amazing. Why is this important? The transition phase may be the most stressful period of care due to the quick changes the body goes through as it starts to shut down. It is during this phase that the patient will go into a deep sleep as the body eventually dies. There are several changes to be aware of so that you can offer suggestions for comfort or simply reassure the family that what is happening is a natural part of the dying process. This knowledge alone can be so comforting and mean everything to that family. So I want to talk to you for a minute about indications that someone is going into a transition phase. You get really good at being a doula and identifying when those nuances of the shift in a change in a patient, when they're decline. And the transition phase, being aware and being on top of when it's coming and preparing families is one of the most important jobs of a doula. It also can be a little challenging, but you start to get really good at it. So I want to give you a few indications of how you would identify somebody's going into a transition phase. Now, the first and foremost sign is that they lose the desire to eat and or the ability to swallow. Now remember, we talked about that being a absolute in end of life, and the body is such an amazing, smart mechanism that when we are ready, our bodies are ready to shut down, it actually turns off our swallowing reflex so that we can't put any more food in it, saying I'm not absorbing it, I don't need it for nutrients, and it's starting to do its own shutdown. Now the danger here is that when somebody is not wanting food and they're very sick or they're at terminal with an end of life and you have all this fear in this household and things are kind of bonkers, a lot of people will start to guilt and force food on their loved one because they do know that if somebody is sick with a terminal diagnosis and starts to say that they don't want to eat, they know that they're going to die soon. But this is exactly a natural part of the process, and it's also a safety risk. If somebody is not able to swallow properly and you are force feeding them, and you're just encouraging, come on, mom, you got to eat, and you're doing it with good intention. First of all, it's just awful for them because they feel horrible, but they could choke and they can aspirate. They can have the food go down into their lungs, and then they die from that. So we want to educate our families ahead of time that this is one of the first indications that somebody, and it's a natural part of the end of life process. It lets us know the body's getting ready. The second thing is they become agitated or restless. Sometimes they talk about having to go home or go on a trip. So I've had patients that haven't been out of bed in weeks and they're adamant, I got to go. And they're kind of they're moving their little legs around. And they're like, I got to go. Mom, where are you going? I got to go home. I got to go. So it's almost as if, for me, I feel like they have one foot in this world and one foot in the other world. It can be a little confusing for them. So what I've done with families and patients is said, what can I help you with? What can I do for you? And they're like, well, I have to pack, or I have to, get some clothes ready, or something they know they are going somewhere. And they usually want to do something to help that be a better situation. So you help them do that. In fact, I've had families where they've packed a little bag and left it right next to the bedside. And then the patient just is so calm. It's like, okay, my bag is packed. They told them what they wanted in it, and it's next to. Now this statement about going home, it's really incredible because in all different places in the world that I've worked with, all different religions, cultures, this I'm going home, and they are in their physical home, means something so much more than home. It's the spiritual home. It's something that is so incredible. And, I have seen it with all different types of people, and it is absolutely amazing and beautiful when they talk about that they know they're going home and they're quite happy about it. So, a third thing is they start to sleep most of the time. So again, personally, I feel like sometimes they are going back and forth because I've been at the bedside and had patients wake up with like all of this information that I don't know how they got, which is really pretty incredible. So it kind of feels that they can go both places at the same time before they actually leave, which is done during the sleep, and they start sleeping most of the time. They talk about being visited by loved ones who have already passed, or even angelic figures. So for me, the most common is the past loved ones. And I will tell you that if you are with someone who will share with you that they have seen, and I have not seen personally somebody else in the room, they will ask me. You always answer honestly. They'll say, do you see that? Do you see my mom or whatever? I have not personally. I have felt things in the room for sure, and there have been like different kind of, like a white kind of like aura type of thing, but not a shape or form. Who's to say that they're not seeing that? And this is so very common. But if you have the privilege of being with somebody at end of life who has seen somebody that they have loved for the first time in a very long time, it is undescribable what the joy and the serenity and the comfort that brings them. If they had any hesitation on dying or fear where they were going, it's gone at this point. Angelic figures I have been told about, which is absolutely beautiful as well. Now, not everyone will have this experience. I'm just sharing with you from thousands of people I've worked with that this is extremely common. So I want you to know about it. What it does also is that families can get they're already really fearful. And if their mom is telling them that her mother is there in the room, they can try and shut it down and be very scared. You might say, well, these people are on a lot of medication. I've had patients on absolutely no medication and their oxygen saturation better than my own, had been sharing with me their experiences. So pretty incredible. They become incontinent, so they're not able to hold their bowel and bladder at the end. So you want to make sure that they are clean and that their skin is dry so that they don't have breakdown. They could have confusion or hallucinations. This has been written in the literature. I don't believe that these are hallucinations. I believe my patients are seeing what they are seeing. I do know that they can get confused because I do feel like they have one foot in this world and one foot in the next at the same time, and that can be confusing to them. And number 7 is a surge of energy. Now, this doesn't happen with all patients, so I don't want to share this with everyone because I don't want families to expect it. But when it does show up, I do share with them what that is. There is a phenomenon called a surge of energy, also known as like a rally, where you've had a patient who's been sleeping most of the time, is on their way out, and then all of a sudden they are wide awake and clear as a bell. And usually what they do is ask you for something to eat or drink. And it's, families could say, oh my gosh, it's a miracle, she's better. And it's not that they're better. It's this phenomenon that's happened. It's like the last wonderful time period before they're going to go, and they are clear as a bell. It usually lasts for a few hours. So I look at it like a window that's opening but slowly shutting, and I want my families to just soak up every bit of it. And if there's anything left to be said, that this is exactly the opportunity for it to happen. And number 8, giving loved ones permission to go. Remember about our woman with our gentleman who was sleeping on the floor. You can even take that further when somebody is not leaving in their transition phase and you know that they are ready to go, that they are dying. Usually they're hanging on for something. They're hanging on for someone to come. They're hanging on for someone to leave, or they're hanging on for something to be resolved, that they don't feel comfortable leaving because there's issues in the house or with people or something. And so we need to usually come to the place where we identify what that is, and then you have to share with your mom that it is okay for her to go, that you are going to there's an issue, you're going to take care of that person and and you guys are all going to be okay, that she can go now. And guess what? People have literally left within minutes from family members telling them that. It is absolutely incredible. All right, let's quickly go through a transition case study. You have an 80-year-old man with a diagnosis of terminal cancer. He has been home on hospice care for 7 weeks. Oh, he has a long time on hospice. That's good. On this visit, his family tells you that he has been declining to eat anything for the last 2 meals and that he is sleeping most of the time. What might you say to the family about this? On your visit the next day, his daughter tells you that her father was talking to somebody in the room that she could not see. When the daughter asked her father who he was speaking to, he replied, "My mother, can't you see her?" So number one, what can you tell the daughter about this? So let's start with, let's talk to the daughter about the 2 meals. And so we have 2 indicators here of the transition phase, of entering the transition phase: sleeping most of the time and declining 2 meals. Because everyone can like skip a meal here and there. But if they decline 2 meals within like an 8-hour span, that they're really, then I start to say, okay, this is where I think we are. I do look for another indicator, but I'm on it. I'm all over this because I want to call this. I'd rather be wrong and call it earlier than be late, because once that person goes into their transition phase, that deep sleep, people cannot have a conversation with them anymore. So that's what I want to tell her, that I think that her father's entering into his transition phase. And then again, there's more here. So this man is in the transition phase. I want to let the family know that once somebody completely stops eating and drinking, that person will most likely go into a sleeping coma within hours to days. And usually it's within days, but I also want to err on the side of caution because again, this is it. We can't go back and do this again. So I'd rather say it's within hours to days. Most commonly it's days, but I have had people go in within hours and I want people to be aware of it. And then from that point on, usually from hours to days, that the person passes. What is the main role of the end-of-life doula in the transition phase? Well, it's to make sure that that patient is dignified and cared for, that that skin is clean, that the family is doing what they need to do, that that patient is pain-free, or the pain is at a minimum if they had pain, but you're also shifting your attention on the loved ones now and getting them ready for the time that their loved one is now going to die. It's going to happen, and I don't think, no matter how prepared we are, I don't think we're ever 100% ready for that moment. Actively dying. So now our patient is in that sleeping coma. What the family needs to do is make sure that that patient is turned and positioned so that there's no skin breakdown. There in the actively dying, there's going to be breathing changes, Shane Stokes, agonal breathing, labored breathing, rapid breathing, shallow breathing. This can be, by the way, extremely uncomfortable for family to hear the different breathing. The patient is really not being bothered by most of that, what's happening, because they're going into their coma, but it can be a labored and a breathing that's uncomfortable that we haven't heard before, and it gets the patient, the family can be very upset. So we want to make sure that we are returning and positioning the patient, and that the nurse, the hospice nurse, has taught the family how to administer the liquid morphine or other medications that might even out some of that breathing. Temperature changes you can expect. You can expect possibly a temperature increase before you get to a definite temperature decrease. So sometimes people will present with a bit of a temperature. And when I say a bit, I mean they can be warm up to 102.8, which 102.8 for you and me, we'd be in the hospital. So you want to use common sense. You want to, if somebody's wrapped up in blankets, you want to put a cool cloth and just put a sheet, expose their feet, let it be open to air. Not everyone gets a high temperature, by the way, at all, but everyone will get cold. And the cold, again, can be scary. People turn pale. They can turn a bluish color. Their lips can turn blue. They can get mottling, which is like different colors on their thighs and their belly. And when you touch them, they can be cold. This scares people. We want them to know that this is a natural part of the end-of-life process and not to be afraid. What would you do for somebody who was cold that you absolutely, wanted to help and love? You'd put blankets on them. You put socks on them. You'd hold their hand. I always say put a warm blanket in the dryer and go ahead and snuggle up your loved ones their whole time during their journey. They love a warm blanket, love you for it. And the last thing for actively dying is the gurgling of secretions, which is really, really something that can be very uncomfortable to hear. One of the easiest and most effective ways to resolve that is to turn a patient on their side, put a pillow folded in half the long way, and have them lying on a bit of an angle. It dislodges those secretions because those are secretions that are being built up and are at the pinpoint of gravity at their breastbone. Their mouths are usually hung open at this time. With the air going in and out, you can hear a little gurgling sound. It sounds actually terrible. It can really be disturbing to families. It's not bothering the patient. But please, if you want to get rid of that, which I want you to, is just to turn the patient on their side. If they start after a while gurgling again, you turn the patient on their other side. By that time, they usually have died. That is a very late sign, the gurgling, that somebody's getting very, very close to the time of death. And setting a sacred space. End of life used to be revered as one of the sacred passages. And we want to help restore that experience for both patient and families. And I have been privileged to see some, not many, to see some beautiful, beautiful end-of-life experiences and studied what the elements were that had that family and patient have such a beautiful end-of-life process. And that's what I share on my platform, because if somebody wants to have it that way, and why wouldn't you for something that is 100% guaranteed, everyone should have the ability with the education and knowledge to what those factors are and how it can be a sacred experience. Soft background music, dim lighting. You can use those candles with batteries. Aromatherapy, if that person likes certain fragrances. You want to watch out for nausea, though, with that. Gentle touch. Again, talk softly. Hearing is the last of the senses to go. The person can hear you. Talk to them. Encourage the family to talk to them. I always encourage family to talk to the loved one all the time. If somebody's not awake, it does not mean that they can't hear you. If they haven't had that heart-to-heart conversation for whatever reason, that can still happen. And pets. Allow pets to be present and snuggle or lay next to their loved one. The pets bring incredible comfort to the patient, and the pet absolutely knows what's happening. So the pet is going through the loss of that loved one as well. Please let them be a part of this process if it's at all possible. And I've seen incredible things happen with pets being just a comfort to that patient by their side. So it works for everybody. So thank you and congratulations. I know that was a lot of information, and I really, really appreciate you being here learning it. I am going to share with you, I'm going to answer your questions in a few minutes. If you have questions, please write them in the question box, and I'll open that up for you. But in the meantime, I am going to share with you about the training. So we are going to have a live semester starting not too far from today. So we have a live semester, but we always have our self-paced classrooms going. But if you'd like to be a part of the trainings and take the full training, either the certified end-of-life doula training or the Doulagiver Specialist, there is a 50% off for those of you who attended this webinar, and that would be available for 3 days from now. So I'm going to show you how you can do that. Classes are normally for the Certified End of Life Doula, $1,997. They are now with the webinar $997. That is for the Certified End of Life Doula training. If you want to take the Doulagiver Specialist, which is the 3 trainings, they are regularly $3,997. Remember, you get 3 full trainings within that, and now you can do that for $1,997. If you want to sign up, this is what you have to do. If you want to sign up for either one of those trainings, you have to go to the website, which is www.doulagivers.com. And that will have right now the discounted prices for the next 3 days for you. You can also call, it'll also have all of the curriculums on there. So when you go on the website, when you click on whatever course you're interested in taking, it's going to outline everything you get with that training. It's amazing. If you have questions, please call us at the Doulagivers Institute at 646-883-6534, and the webinar discount is valid for the 3 days. So I will leave this screen up while we are taking the questions, and so you have the Doulagivers website available to you, and go ahead and look at what those classes entail. The first 100 people from the webinar are also going to get the entire video version of the Certified End of Life Doula training. That was from Seattle, Washington in April. And the first 50 people, in addition, will get a 60-minute one-on-one coaching and strategy session with either myself or one of our lead trainers, so that if you want to do this for a business, you will get your one-on-one strategy session to set that up and how that will work. So I'm going to leave this up. Do go to the website for those 2 different trainings and for the offerings, and I'm going to see what we have in the question box. Okay, so we have a lot in the question box, everybody, and I want to thank you. Can we view or just listen? What does that mean? Can we view or just listen? So let's see. Then somebody wrote, never mind. Are you willing to share this deck with those on the call? No worries if not. I'm taking notes and wondered. So can somebody let me know on here that you saw the different slides that were going on, because we had our screen sharing, we were sharing the slides. I just want to make sure that if you finish the classes taking, okay. Are doulas being hired by hospices, or is this a self-employment situation? So that's from Brandy. So please just somebody indicate that you saw the slides going through this whole webinar, because we had them going through and we had on all of our screen sharing. So yeah, maybe we were just moving. Yes, I saw the slides. Yay! Thank you, Jessica. Okay, I appreciate that. For a minute, you know, you love technology and you have to. So what was happening is, I think as I'm talking with different slides, we sat on different slides for a little bit, and maybe somebody was just thinking that. Okay, great. Guys, thank you so much. The slides were just fine. Great. I was able to see the slides. Just wondered if you shared the deck with the participants. So the deck, is that what you mean with all of these slides? I am going to do my best to send you all a recording of this with the slides intact, and I hope that means the deck. Is there job placement program assistance as well? So Brandy, with our training, we have a network and we have a directory that we let you have the optimal way nationally. It depends on where you're located, and also there's an international where we can sign you up, that people can find you, that families can find you. So we're really working on placement, but we don't necessarily have like an agency yet, but we do have families call our main office and ask for requests all the time. But we put that into a system where we want to have families just go to that website or location where they can find the doula that's in their area, because that is really important. So yes, there is help for that. And there's all the business building and marketing component to the work. So when you go to the website and you look under those different programs, you're going to see in the packages, the marketing packages and the business building packages are part of those trainings. So you're going to get everything you need for your business to market and build it. Okay, I did see the slides. Great. How can I get a copy of the slides? Okay, Sonia, we're going to convert this tape and send it back to all the participants. Thank you very much, Bren, for saying I saw them. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Okay, are doulas being hired by hospice, or is this self-employed business situation? So, Brandy, for me, the ideal way that the doula is going to be of service is through an independent practice. That being said, and the reason that I'm so steadfast on feeling that way is because I want you to be in control over who you work with, how long you work with them, and when you work with them. I want you to have the freedom to walk that journey the entire time with that patient family, without limitations, without restrictions. That being said, hospices are absolutely wonderful, and they like the doula concept, and they know that it does help be a great support to the main system of care that they have, the care team for the end-of-life patient. And so I have a doula right now in California who has 2 hospices fighting to hire her full-time as an end-of-life doula. So if that doesn't answer your question, this is great. This has been a long time coming. So now hospices are hiring doulas. They're referring them out or they're hiring them. So you can do and we talk about that in the certification course. We'll talk about all the different ways that you can work as an end-of-life doula and how you do that. For me, again, and maybe I'm a little like just biased that I like to have like as much control over my schedule, but I really love the vision of the independent practitioner because in so many ways you're able to really give 100% of yourself to that patient and that family without restrictions. You know, I often use the example of on a Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and your shift is done. If your patient is transitioning and dying, do you say, you know, good luck and I'll call you Monday. I hope it all works out. You really don't do that as an end-of-life doula. If your family needs you, you have the flexibility to walk them through that for the next couple of hours. Look at what I did with that little girl and waited for her to get off the school bus and spent time with her so that we could feel comfortable in that space when I knew this is it. So I was so glad to donate that. So there's so many different ways you can work as a doula within hospice or as an independent practitioner, and we'll explain that all to you in the program. Okay, so let's go to this one. If you finish the classes, taken the test, and working on your 30 hours, can you still advertise as a certified end-of-life doula? I have not submitted my test yet because I am still doing my 30 hours. Thank you for sharing that question, because no, you really, to be certified, you have to complete your hours. For you, you are also doing the elder care doula training, I believe, and the consultant training, and you can start to do the elder care piece, but the end-of-life piece, I need your hours and I need you to be fully certified before you start advertising for it. So if you want to talk to one of us at the office, please let us know, but definitely you could start promoting your elder care doula and getting the word out there while you're acquiring your hours. But thank you for sharing that, because that's a really important, and it's really very much a point of ethics and doing this the right way. Thank you. This was amazing information, Suzanne. Bren, thank you. Thank you. You're very welcome. Is the certified practitioner included in the Doulagiver Specialist, or is that a different program? No, it's all in that program. So for me, I'm going to advise people who really want to do this work as a profession and make this their main income. I really would say to you to go ahead and really focus on doing the Doulagiver Specialist, because that has the certified end-of-life doula training in it. So you'll be a certified end-of-life doula, but you'll have 3 different offerings on how to change end of life, help the elderly, and make a living. So you do consulting work. My consulting that I've done was 100. Now, remember, I've done this for a while, but I was given, and some of my other consultants, the same thing, $125 an hour for consulting for end-of-life planning. That's a whole different, consulting is a whole higher pay rate than when you're doing the actual work. And that's when you do that with healthy individuals. So you have your consultant practice, and that's great because you're not in the middle of crisis. Then you have an elder care component because you really want to step up and you want to work with people in your community before they maybe are necessarily an end of life. And here's the other thing. People will give you pushback for their, and they've done this to me. Oh, I don't need an end of life doula right now. I'm not there yet. I'll call you when I'm there. And you know what? They're in their terminal journey. And I wish I could be there because they needed me, but they were so afraid of the end of life piece to it. The Death Doula title is that they wouldn't let me in. but they would call me at the very end, but that didn't really make a huge difference for anybody. If I had said at the time, back in the day, that I have an elder care service that I can give you, will you take an elder care holistic service? Absolutely. Come on in. But there are plenty, and that gets us into that scenario way before it's a crisis and at the very end. But the truth of the matter is there are so many elderly that are deserving of holistic support for a long time before they are not before they're at an end of life, and we're just not getting that. The end of life caring for elderlies and that type of space out there is not good and not given any kind of education. So we've really reworked this whole thing, that we can do consulting before anyone reaches the end of life, that we know how to work with the elder section for decades, and that we are in place for the end of life piece. You will be working all of the time and make yourself a full-time income, and you will not be running around and burnt out by just doing 40 hours of end of life every week, which is almost impossible to do, although you can, but that has a shelf life. I'll tell you right now that it is a lot emotionally. And if you want to really do this work and do it in a balanced, well done way, you want to be able to do the 3 offerings if you need to make a full-time income. So with that reduced rate, I offer the specialist because I want everyone who wants to really do this work have an ability to be a doula-giver specialist. Thanks, Jessica. I love that. Are you willing to share this deck with those on the call? No worries if not. Okay, so I think we addressed that, Kit, or this is actually somebody else, and I'm assuming the deck is the slides, and absolutely yes, we will send that back to you. What about INELDA as an organization in the movement? Yeah, they're another training option. There are a few training options that are great. People are really wonderful. What you do need to know is that whoever is giving the training or develop the training is going to develop it from their experience and background. So if you have, like for myself, a hospice oncology nurse, I'm going to give you a lot of everything, and I'm going to give you a lot of physical care. In fact, the end of life doula training, it has 3 different levels. In the second level, I give you the top 10 end-of-life disease processes, and I take you on a journey with that patient and family with that disease process and the whole decline of what the symptom management would be for that and what you would do for interventions for comfort. Completely amazing. But that's my background as a nurse. If you have a social worker, which the INELDA is, you're going to have a little bit of a different perspective. All beautiful, all wonderful work. It depends on what you're looking for. So I'd always say study the curriculum, study what the curriculum is and your teacher, and see what resonates with you, and just go with that. Okay, Stacy, let's see. My first time on this. Shane, okay, but you're good at this point. Stacy, you got all set. And okay, let me just go to the bottom again and see if there are more questions. And my goodness, there are. So let me start at the bottom. Also, what is the benefit of your training versus a Conscious Dying Institute and an elder course? Again, so I think there's wonderful trainings out there. They're going to be all different curriculums, and that is a bit of the danger with an end-of-life doula profession and title. Because if I am an end-of-life doula trained with Doulagivers, and somebody is an end-of-life doula trained with another organization, and they're different trainings and curriculums, yet we do both work with end-of-life patients, it's very confusing to families. And if they heard about a family that had worked with an end-of-life doula from one of the companies, had a great experience, the doula did X, Y, and Z, and then they get a terminal diagnosis for their loved one, it's a crisis situation, oh, there's an end-of-life doula, I can hire her, she comes in, she's not coming in with the same set of offerings or skill set. That can be very confusing to families. So we try and really educate families on that they need to know the doula they're hiring, what they do, what they don't do. And also that the national badge from NEDA is a way that can circumvent that. So everyone can go to whatever training, but if we all go and take this national core competency assessment and can just show that I have my NIDA badge, then every family will know that if they have, the doula has the NIDA badge, they're good. If I hope that helps. And I think there's just so many wonderful people doing wonderful work, but some people do more hands-on care. Some people do more vigil sitting. You really need to know what's happening out there. So again, study the curriculum, look at the curriculums, and look at your trainers and what their background are. Great talk, thank you. Is this the same training that comes with the actual paid End of Life Doula certification course? If so, would this not be redundant? It's an overview of the first level. There's 3 levels to the End of Life Doula certification. It is very thorough, very full, and the level 1 is different than this one. This is just an overview for it. So again, it gave you a taste of what that would be, but you're going to have 8 different case studies, different patient scenarios. You're going to go into depth with the different phases. Very, very involved, and really, really wonderful. So if you're looking to do something, I highly advise to look into it. Does this qualify me to work in Canada? So good, very good question, Brenda. We have Doulagivers, End of Life Doulas in 8 different countries now. So this is recognized internationally. Doula is a non-licensed medical profession. So this is a non-medical profession that you would have to find out in the country that you're working in. You find out, again, what is equivalent to, which I'm going to teach you about advanced directives and different things of that nature. What is your equivalent to hospice care, or what is your hospice support? Palliative care, and then of course you apply any of that language to your work and your offering once you graduate, but this can be applied to any country and any situation. How do we arrange to get our 30 hours? Where would we do that? Great question. So we will share with you different options. We even are now starting to get requests from different hospice organizations that have multiple locations throughout the country to please send our doula students to their hospice to get their hours. So we have relationships with a few hospices, and then if that's not close by you, we will suggest a few other ways to do that. Here's another question. I have an opportunity to work with a lady from my church that is needing an end-of-life doula. She is dying. With the hours I volunteer working with her, help towards my hospice volunteer hours. She is with Hospice Center. I will be with her because she is a church. Absolutely, 100%. And thank you for being there for her. So you don't just have to get it through hospice. You can go ahead and be in your community and work with people and get your hours. You just are going to obviously let us know on that form that we have you fill out what the disease process is, the hours that you put in, and what the end of life phase that you were working with her on. So absolutely, and I'm so glad that you are doing that. And churches, by the way, churches and religious organizations are one of the best places to go and let them know about your services. Beautiful. Thank you for all the valuable information. You are so welcome. I love the specialist training content. Thank you, Bren. I love it too. And that's why I feel like I bring it to a place where if you were going to pay the standard price for the certified end-of-life doula, I want you to take the Doulagiver specialist for the same price. That's why I bring it down to that same fee, because that is going to be, first of all, the way you work right away. You can work the minute that you're done with the training. You can be a consultant and go out there and get your clients. You can make a full-time income, and also you're going to be supplying what's going to literally change the end of life from being the crisis that it is now to something that eventually changes over into a positive experience. Positive for our elderly, planning ahead with people, and being there at the end of life. So thank you, Brennan. I hope that you do that. How do patients pay the doula? What kind of insurance does the doula need? Patients, it's a self-paid program, unless, of course, there's a hospice that's hiring you. This is self-pay. The companion companies that are in America are $1 billion industry, and they just have people as companions. So the money is there. We want to highly train people. And also what I say and share is that maybe possibly taking some of the money that we use at the end when we are having funerals and memorials and things of that nature, which again, we don't plan ahead, and we get caught in a crisis state, that most people have told me that they made poor decisions and paid way too much for the funeral when their mother wasn't with them anymore. If you could take a tiny bit of that, if you could take a quarter or a third of that and consider hiring a doula for the end so that everyone benefits from that, it would absolutely change the whole journey. So it's a self-pay. The money is there. We use sliding scales. I will teach you in the program how to package and how to find your pay rate and how to do that. There's a whole business component that we'll share with you on how to do it. And what kind of insurance does the doula need? The doula needs End of Life Doula insurance, and that is very reasonable. I think I want to say about $140 for a $2 million policy. We have the agency that we direct you to, and that you simply go on and get your insurance once you graduate. Once you are ready to practice, within 30 days from the time that you want to start, we have you sign up for your insurance and you are all covered. We'll teach you all that in business. With all 3 trainings, do you have to begin January 14th? Okay, great. So there is a live semester coming up. We have live semesters coming up. They're going to be given twice a year. The academic semester is amazing because you're going to have an opportunity. So the answer to that is no. You can do your self-paced class at any time. But the live semesters are great because you're all going in with a peer group. We have absolutely amazing people that are registered for the next one from all over the world. It's going to be a weekly live webinar. However, it's the same curriculum that you're going to instantly get in a self-paced classroom. At the same time, you're going to have office hours with a lead trainer open to you Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. that you can call any day and talk about training, questions, anything you have, somebody live on the phone to guide you. You also will be in a Facebook group of just your academic group. So you will all be in, you can share questions. Myself and another lead trainer will be monitoring that group every day and answering your questions while you're going through training. And so most people do a combination. They love the live training, but they can't get to every live class. So you're always sent the replay of it, but you can also just move ahead in your live class, or you can go ahead and listen to the recording before the next one. It's wonderful. I love taking advantage of the live semester because there's so much momentum and networking for you all that I love to see how that has lasting different relationships for when you graduate, and it's just really fun to do. So you don't have to begin January 24th or whenever the next live semester is. You can start right now, and then you can always look to see when the next following live semester would be. But you always get a self-paced class. Can you volunteer in hospice prior to getting hours? Sure, absolutely. Go ahead and, I think that if you're also interested in doing this, you should really get real about what it means. Volunteering for hospice is a great way to do that. Are you comfortable in that space? Are you comfortable with what would be asked of you if you haven't been around end of life before? Ask people, get the real truth about what it's going to be like before, if you haven't been or you're not sure about something. And the volunteers for hospice are just incredible, beautiful people. I specialize in grief coaching children's families and child loss. Is there a need for doulas with internal children's cases? Oh my goodness, yes. So first of all, thank you and bless you for that, Brandy. There is a lot of need for that, and there's a lot of need for education with that. I think people really get thrown off. They get thrown off at end of life in general. They really get thrown off when a child is affected. And as you know as well as I do, sometimes the child can be the most grounded and together in the end of life experience. It's just the family and everyone else. It's just really hard, but it happens. And so there's a huge need for that. You can specialize in that. Really beautiful. Are classes online, or do you offer training in the Denver area? They are online. So we do a live online weekly. It's the best we can do for getting as many people again on a global level being able to access the trainings and then having academic semesters so that we can interact again on the daily basis, live weekly webinars, private Facebook academic groups. So it's live, but it's online, and it works beautifully. Linda, it's I've graduated some of my best doulas from the online classroom, so I love it. Yes, I have finished all of 3 classes. Perfect. Okay, great. So let's get you started with putting your business out there and starting to get some clients, but you're just going to have to wait till you have your 30 hours for you to do the End of Life Doula certification practitioner. But you're so there, you can do the consultant. And so you call our office if you need some more guidance on that, but you're ready to start to fly. So I'm going to let you do that. Another one, I am a medium in Edmonton. I feel called to this service. Is being a medium a benefit, or can I get in the way? Well, what do you think? I think that people who come to this beautiful work, they get it. They get that there's so much more going on than what most of people think right now. My intuition is one of my best assets. First of all, your intuition is one of your greatest gifts that you have. And being in tune with that intuition, it will guide you to exactly the higher plane of where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And I listen to that little voice all of the time on my cases, and it guides me exactly for what I'm supposed to be doing, saying, sharing with the patient. So I think it will be absolutely phenomenal. You have to, again, I wouldn't volunteer information at the outright. You would ask permission of families if you're getting messages that you want to, and you would want to get their permission if they'd like to hear that. Some people get really freaked out by that, but it will help you tremendously being the End of Life Doula, because it's just we're all working in this wonderful space for the higher good for this family. So the more the merrier on that. I am also a grief coach. Do doulas work with the families post-death as well? Yes, and that is something that is so important to understand. Doulas work with people hopefully before they're even terminal, and then all throughout the journey, the terminal diagnosis, the active dying, the death, the post-death, and the after, what I call re-entry after loss, which is, again, something that we're missing as part of our services to those at end of life. We just kind of drop it all at the time of death. I'm so sorry, good luck, that's it. But there's so much more for the grief component, which some people really have challenges with, especially since we don't even talk about end of life. How do we talk about grief or coping with it? So there's a beautiful area to continue with families throughout even if you have an elderly woman who lost her husband, there are people that meet with their wife of a client every week still. The family wants to know that mom's doing okay. You're checking in. You became a real comfort to her in one of the most important times in her life. And that relationship is ongoing. It's not, it's more of a friendship and kind of a companion at that point. But yeah, and making sure that she's, okay to re-enter by herself. It might be the first time she's by herself for 45 years. So absolutely, Brandy. Here's another one. I was blessed to meet a young lady starting her own hospice center. She learned about me and taking my doula classes. She asked me to give her more information about me and my classes. She wants me to work with her hospice center. Wow, that's great. Okay, oh my gosh, so exciting. This movement, this area of care is exploding, and it's all over. There is opportunity because it is the missing piece to healthcare now. So you can literally incorporate yourself in nursing homes, assisted livings, palliative care. I can see us in doctor's offices at some point, all over. But that's absolutely beautiful. I'm so glad to hear it. Where in the website do I go to get the free one-on-one? Stacy, the first 50 people that do sign up for this, we're going to give you a notification that you have your one-on-one, and then you would schedule it when your time, we'll give you some time slots and what works for you. But the minute that you register, the first people that register will be told that they are in with their 60-minute and with their video of the entire Seattle training. Again, you'll get times that you can schedule, and the 60-minute is good for whenever you want it. So we just have to match you with the time. So that would be an email response if you are in with the first 50. What is the average income for doula work? So Brandy, an end-of-life doula will have patients come and go. So it's not going to be something that you're going to have 40 hours of guaranteed work every week. And that's why I say to you, what are you looking to do with this? Are you called to make this your profession? Do you want to do this work? And if so, I want you to look into the Doulagiver Specialist so you can work right away every week and then take care of your end-of-life patients as they come and go and not be stressed for that. So Time magazine had written an article in 2017, saying that the average independent doula was making between $40,000 and $70,000 in the United States a year. So if you want to go by that, that's not bad. But we have people that make more. There are people that can make less. If you're a consultant and you like if you are open to that kind of work and helping families to do their paperwork, that has a higher price point, and that would get you a more consistent higher rate on a regular basis. Thank you. You're welcome, Kit. Okay, I'm enjoying volunteering, ready to get started. I know that you're ready to get started, and I know the hours are something. So again, let us see if there's a way that we can help you to speed up getting your hours, because you're like right there and ready to go, and we want to help you get out there. Does a doulagiver do the physical lifting, turning of a patient? Trisha, it's up to you. So when we teach you about your business, we're going to teach you about what, first of all, you're comfortable doing and what you're not comfortable doing, and how we set you up with a interview checklist for your families. And that's going to be specific to you, and it's going to have what you offer on that. So if you're somebody who doesn't ever want to lift somebody, and when I say lift somebody, if somebody is slipping down in the bed, and you can help, because it's always better when you can do it with two people. If you can help a little old lady to help kind of lift their husband back to the top of the bed, I would hope that you'd pitch in to do that. But if it's something that you're really not comfortable with doing anything too physical, then we would have to incorporate that, and that is okay. Incorporate that into your interview checklist for your family so that they're well aware at the very beginning that that is not something that you do, but you will make sure that there are people in that household that do that. So again, I'm very much an advocate on making your doula practice really resonate with who you are and what you're comfortable doing. And that's the beauty of doing independent practice. So does the doula specialist include the end-of-life doula information? Yes, Wendy, it does. It includes all of it. It includes the end-of-life doula certification, includes the Doulagiver care consultant certification, and the elder care doula training program. It's amazing. Last slide, April is 2018, FYI. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Yes. So this is the video. I did a certification live training in Seattle, Washington in 2018, and I videotaped it. We had a video crew there, and we're going to give you a whole end-of-life doula certification video training. So you're going to get webinars, you get your online classroom, but as a bonus, I have all that footage from the live event, which was incredible. And if you're somebody who likes to watch video and to hear me teaching in front of the Seattle group, you can get that as well. So that's just a bonus. So thank you for saying that. I wasn't sure what that meant for a minute. Does each state have their own compliance to work? No, the end-of-life doula is not a licensure, nor is it go state by state. And that's why NIDA came up with a national badge and assessment, which oversees all of best practices. And it's really really great. So once you go through the Doula Givers training, you can sit for your national badge. It will have all of that information in it. And I highly recommend it if you're going to work. It's absolutely wonderful. The deck is the presentation. Yes. Okay. Thank you. So you will get that. We'll send this back to all of you so you can see it again. I think she's asking, will you give copies? Yep, I will. Please tell me about training in Alberta, Canada. So again, we do all our trainings online, and we have people take it from all over the world. And so wherever you are, you can take that training and you can practice, but you should be aware of, in different countries, what, again, comparable paperwork is, what your additional end-of-life support system in your mainstream medical system is, and how families would access that. So that's something that you would find out for Canada. Okay. Let's just see if there's some more at the end here. You guys are asking great questions. How do I find your company to check it out? Because I send in yes, I want to take your specialist course. So you go into the doulagivers.com. You go to www.doulagivers.com. That on the home page is going to have 2 classes available. One will say Certified End of Life Doula. The other will say Doulagiver Specialist. So you click on whichever one that you're interested in, and it will give you a full outline of all the curriculum and everything that's going to be part of that course. And then you can register right then and there. If you prefer to call the office, if you want to call the International Doulagivers Institute, you can do that by calling, and you can register that way by calling 646-883-6532. And again, that's in New York City, 646-883-6534. And that will be on that website. It will have the number that you can call as well. Okay, great. What is the main difference between the 2 options for training classes? So Amy, the main difference is one has 3 different offerings that you can build an end-of-life business, consulting, caring for aging, and caring for those at end of life by being an end-of-life doula. And one is simply the certified end-of-life doula training. Your end-of-life doula, if you want to do it, which people are really moving into this space and wanting to do this as a profession, it's moving that way. The doula profession will be the answer to the healthcare crisis because it's a non-medical professional that is filling in the gaps in time and care. And we have staggering numbers of people that are aging for the next decades to come. And so the 2 is really deciding what you want to do. So for me, being an end-of-life doula is so incredible. It's just the most wonderful, and it's the biggest honor to do that work. But my patients come and go. So I might have a patient that I'm working with and doing 40 hours a week, and then they pass, and I'm doing less with the family, but I'm still in touch. But then I don't have a patient for a while. So if I'm dependent on this for my full-time income and I have a certain amount that I have to make, I might want to consider working with doing consulting and doing elder care work as well, so that I know I have all my full-time pay that I need, and that I can take one end-of-life doula client and family and walk that whole journey with them from start to finish with no issues. So one is the certified end-of-life doula, and the Doulagiver Specialist has the certified end-of-life doula training as part of it. So you get that complete training, but you also get the Doulagiver care consultant training, and you get the elder care doula training. So it'll show you on that website that you'll see all the different curriculums and things of that. Okay, so let's see what we have. I think that we've pretty much, I'm sorry, I just registered for the free 90-minute course again tonight, trying to get the one-on-one. I'm already registered for the website. Okay, so Stacy, if you have gone through and registered for one of those classes, and you are within those first 150 people, you will get a notification tonight that you have the 60-minute one-on-one, and that you also have the video training. So you should be hearing from the office within the next hour or two as they start to go through all the registrations. Okay, so you'll get a confirmation on that. All right, everyone, I think that's it. Thank you so very much for being part of the End of Life Doula training. I am going to do my best to offer this every month on some form that people can come on and get some basic knowledge. Our lives are so very busy. We're training in different parts of the world. We have a nonprofit that we go out and help communities to, get education so they can be self-sufficient. So it might not be consistent. We are going to do our best to do that, but I'm so glad that you are here now, and thank you for taking this webinar. So here's all the thank yous coming in. Thank you, exclamation, thank you all. And if you have any questions, please let us know. Doulagivers.com and the International Doulagivers Institute. Everyone, thank you again. Have a great night. My name is Suzanne O'Brien.